Welcome to the third episode of the second season of the Taste Media Group Intelligence Series. We are joined today by Chris Johnson of Johnsonese Brokerage. Chris, thanks a lot for your time coming through today.
My pleasure.
So talking about your insurance brokerage firm, give us an overview of all that you guys do.
So we are an independent insurance agency focused on entertainment and sports. And in the entertainment world, our biggest business is film production. So we insure independent films, commercials, industrial shoots, those types of things. And then we also do errors and omissions insurance, which covers completed productions.
And so full disclosure, Chris does issue our insurance here at Taste Media Group, which we are thankful for. And getting into the idea of insurance in production, in the creative space, I mean, we all know, our home insurance, our auto insurance, but when we're talking specifically about this film and entertainment world, what is unique about this space and how do you kind of approach it?
What makes it unique in and of itself is what makes it unique from an insurance perspective. It's because it's so project-based. If you think about more traditional businesses, like I always use dry cleaners as an example, right? Year after year, the business is the same. You put insurance in place and the program kind of stays the same for the life of the business. But every film is a little bit different. It has different components. It has a different team working on it, different locations. And so you're looking at each one kind of as a unique project and trying to tailor the insurance solutions directly to that project and even to the time limit of the project. So for a commercial shoot you might have a policy that's only 3 days long. So that's kind of the fun and unique part about it is every project's a little bit different.
Yeah, and so just this is kind of a fascinating space to myself because when you're coming up and you're trying to learn about production and what it takes to pull stuff off, I mean no one really talks about the insurance component of it in school. I mean, I don't think it was mentioned once. But this is a huge part. This can be a huge either deterrent or can really help you expedite getting stuff done. And you've always been really quick whenever we needed a COI done. I'm eternally thankful for that. But just getting into the logistics of where the liability stands, how do you kind of explain that to people? Is it the client? Is it the production company? Is it the contractor that's working for the production company? I mean, what type of levels go on in any type of production?
I mean, to a certain extent, it's all of the above. Everybody has some risk, and so therefore some exposure and some need to manage that risk, whether it's through insurance or other ways. But the producer typically, when you're thinking about a production, has overall responsibility for the project. They're telling people what to do, where to be, that type of thing. So they ultimately have the biggest responsibility typically on a production. And so they're the ones typically the most responsible for getting the insurance. And that's why you have locations and rental houses and film offices requesting proof of insurance from the producer because they're considered the owner of the production, the most responsible party for the production.
So Chris, when you're thinking about a production, what are the costs? I mean, what should people know? I mean, is there price ranges? Is there reference points? You said there's a lot of variables, but when it comes down to the actual cost, like the amount that it's going to come out of the producer's pocket, the budget, how should people kind of treat that?
It really depends a lot on the production itself. And I was trying to actually think of an analogy today because sometimes people think insurance is binary, either I have it or I don't. And my analogy I came up with actually on the way here was it's like making dinner, right? If you're planning to go home and make dinner for your partner and you call them and you say, do we have food? And they say yes. You're not really prepared to make dinner, right? You need the right ingredients and the right amounts and that. And insurance is kind of the same way. It's not yes, I have it or no, I don't. There's a variety of coverages and limits and deductibles that you need to choose to make the plan match, what your risks actually are. So it's like, insurance is kind of a la carte. You order the various things you need. But factors in terms of a production that determine cost of insurance are the budget for the production, the number of shoot days, if there's any stunts in the production, the value of the equipment you're going to be renting, the amount you're paying people to work on the production, the number of people working on the production. And then you get into things like insurance requirements for locations. So for example, if you're shooting in a major office building or a large condo building, they're typically going to have higher insurance requirements than if you're just shooting in a storefront or a warehouse, that kind of thing. So
yeah, no, that's a great response just in terms of being able to learn all of the variables that go into how you do your job. And then speaking about how you do your job, I mean, as a firm, we come to you and you have this plethora of knowledge that you can kind of fall back on in terms of what we need, and then you kind of go out there in the market and try to find us the best deal possible.
Yeah, we're kind of like a dating service. So we match the clients with the insurance company that has the best product match for them. And that might involve putting together multiple different insurance companies that provide parts of the package so that it's the best total combination for the client.
In the packages you put together for us in the past, I mean, you're not going to the Geico's, the State Farms,
Right.
the Allstates. I mean, these tend to be very specific companies in themselves, if I'm correct.
Yeah, these are more specialized insurance companies, because you think about it, when you're in the industry, it seems gigantic. But if you compare the film industry to, say, the size of retail, it's pretty specialized. So there are fewer insurance companies that do it. So yeah, the name brands that you're used to hearing, like State Farm and Allstate, typically don't do film production insurance. It's just a more specialized field that's not their specialty. They're really good at auto insurance or homeowners insurance or whatever. This is a specialty field that, you want to work with an insurance company that has experience in it and knows what they're doing.
And as the production community, and I can only really speak for Chicago, has become kind of more splintered, more boutique shops like ours.
Mm-hmm.
Were back even when I graduated college, there was kind of like 5 big production companies, and they don't even really exist anymore.
Right.
How do you kind of walk people through like what they need at what point in their business development?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I think one of the biggest mistakes people in the production business make with insurance is that they let other people define what their insurance requirements are. In other words, they're doing a production and they say, okay, our location is requiring this and the film office is requiring that, so this is the insurance we want. And you really need to take a step back from that and say, what I'm trying to do is protect my production. And by that I mean 2 things. One is that if bad things happen, you have the financial resources to still finish the production, because that's the first goal, right? To get the production done. And then you also want to protect your reputation so that you can do future projects, so that people will still work with you in the future, so that financiers will still fund your projects in the future. So you need to look at it from your own standpoint. What are the risks in my production? What do I need to do to protect my production to make sure I can finish it? And, again, to protect my career. And like an example I'll use is weather insurance. So let's suppose,
Which in Chicago is
Right.
is a thing.
right. So let's suppose, you're going to be shooting on the beach, right? So, and, on Lake Michigan, and it's, a pretty expensive production. Maybe it's costing you $50,000 for the day. Well, you get permission from the park department to have your production there. They're going to give you the permit. You meet their insurance requirements. But they don't care if there's lightning and you can't work that day and your production gets canceled. It's not their problem. But it is for you, because you've just lost the $50,000 in production costs you had that day. If you get weather cancellation insurance, you can actually be insured that if certain weather events happen, the insurance company will pay essentially for you to reschedule that day's worth of production. So nobody outside your production is going to make you do that, because that's not their concern. But it's really important to you, because if you don't have that money, you may not be able to finish your production.
Exactly. That's a great example.
Yeah.
And then kind of getting into someone who's in your position, you write you create the policy, whatever your client's looking for,
Mm-hmm.
you satisfy it. Hopefully you never hear from them. I'm assuming the only time you hear the follow-up calls is when something doesn't go right. Are there any outliers or any stories you have throughout the years where that kind of stick out, and more like dinner party stories that are okay to still tell?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, unexpected things that happen on productions. I mean, there's theft of gear is a reality that happens now. Cameras are so small now. They're so valuable. They're easy to just, if you think about back in the day, like camera operators were all big burly guys because you had to pick up this giant thing. And so there are people that will target specific productions. They'll act like a member of the production and just walk into a grip truck and walk away with equipment.
Geez.
So we've certainly had productions that have had that happen. One of my banes of my existence, because it happens so often, is somebody driving a grip truck hits the canopy at a gas station because they're not used to driving a truck and they don't think about how tall it is. So little things like that happen. In a really random one time, we had a film shooting in downstate Illinois, right? So peaceful rural country. We had someone just driving between shoot locations. they got rear-ended by a car that was being chased by the police. There was a murder suspect that the police in downstate Illinois returned, and they rear-ended one of our client's vehicle. Luckily, no one was hurt, but just like,
whatever can happen can happen.
a murder suspect in
right.
downstate Illinois?
Right. So
Yeah,
again,
so, a lot of unpredictable things happen.
it's one of the realities of doing video content these days is that we are shooting everything digitally. It's not on tapes. There's no physical form. When you go back to look back through stuff, I mean, there is a possibility that you could easily delete hours of work by just trying to go back and relook at your work. What can be done to protect this, and have you seen this happen before?
Absolutely. So, and this is one of those where it's actually easier to understand the insurance concept if you go back to the film days. And there was a coverage called faulty stock coverage. And what that would be is you're shooting on film, right? So you shoot the film, shoot a whole day's worth of production, you ship that film off to be developed. It gets to the developer and they're like, oh, this stock film was bad and you've lost everything. The insurance would pay for the cost of reshooting that day. Well, now it's called faulty stock and digitalized image coverage, and it's the same thing. So a hard drive crashes and you've lost a day's worth of content. That coverage will help pay to reshoot that lost content.
So that should be something that producers should definitely be looking into.
Yeah,
because
especially.
I mean, thankfully it hasn't happened to us, but it is a reality that it has happened. I've heard of it happening,
yes,
and it's
it
not
definitely
an
has.
easy conversation to have with the client.
Right. And especially the higher your costs are per day of shooting, the more important this coverage is, because the more valuable what you've done that day is that you potentially have lost. And yeah, I've definitely had clients lose content.
And then something else I've always kind of wondered about it as well is, we do a fair amount of corporate work, so you're going into these corporate offices. A lot of times the client doesn't technically own the building, they're leasing. So we end up kind of in this area where we're like dealing with office management companies. And I don't know if you remember this, but it was very pertinent to my life at the time, but we had a client that we were doing a lot of work for, and they wanted an insurance policy that was basically along the lines of a major scale construction company.
Right.
And their whole thing was that, you guys are plugging something into the wall. And I said, well, does every guy with a computer or person with a computer that comes in, do they have to provide an insurance policy? And
Right.
we're not joining any wattage that's anything ridiculous. Like what is that thought process from these companies, and what can be done to we worked it out, but I remember that can be like a huge thing.
It's absolutely a challenge, and it happens all the time. So the bigger the building, whether it's an office building or a condo building, chances are they have professional management of the building, and they are typically mostly used to dealing with contractors who are coming to do maintenance on the building.
Like
so
literally knock walls down.
Yeah, so they're going to be replacing windows on the 50th floor of an office tower, or putting in air conditioning on the roof. These are people that are doing big, dangerous projects. And so buildings tend to have these standard insurance requirements that can be really onerous, much more than a small production company would typically have. And so this happens, I want to say every day, but it's not literally every day, but it happens all the time, where a client will send us these really over-the-top requirements that are really almost impossible for a small production company to meet, just because of cost restraints. How we usually approach it is we coach the production company to talk to their client. So typically their client is a tenant in the building, and they need to talk to building management and say, okay, we're having somebody come in to do a small film shoot. What are the requirements you really need for that, as opposed to construction contractors? And it all depends on if you can get to a high enough person in the management of the building that can give you a waiver on the requirements. And sometimes you end up buying those higher insurance just to get in the building.
Yeah,
So,
we've done it in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's definitely something that I know, would just boggle my mind, because it was outside the realm of like any type of like normal thought process.
Yeah, and a lot of times what we'll do for our clients, the producer, is we'll say, okay, we're going to quote meeting those requirements for the building, and then you can show that to your client and say, okay, this is how much the insurance is going to cost if we really try to meet these, extreme requirements of the building, and we're going to have to pass that cost on to you.
Sometimes I've noticed too, it literally depends like how you like bring the equipment in. Like if you come in through the loading dock versus the front door, it's like two different worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the people at the loading dock, that's their job to not let you in unless you meet the insurance requirements. So they're absolutely gonna, enforce that. And that's why, and like I say, you can't always do it, but the one approach you can do is to talk to your client and say, And because they're a customer of the building, right? So the building, is motivated to listen to them, building management, as opposed to you, this person that's trying to come in their building and do something. They're a client, paying rent every month. And so they have the leverage with building management to potentially get you a waiver on the insurance requirements.
So something else I wanted to ask you about is release forms. How do you advise for release forms, and what can producers do from an insurance standpoint to make sure that they are covered in case somebody gets into one of their productions who maybe didn't sign a release form or comes back later on and says, I don't want my image used in this?
Right. So that is...
And you're not a lawyer, I understand.
Right.
So this is all from your perspective.
Yeah, so I'm giving it from the insurance perspective, not the legal perspective. But there's a type of insurance called errors and omissions insurance, E&O insurance. And the way I usually explain that to people is E&O insurance is a form of professional liability insurance, and so is malpractice insurance. So if you think about medical malpractice insurance, if the doctor makes a mistake, they operate on the wrong foot, they leave, a sponge in the patient's body or whatever, and they get sued, that type of insurance protects them. It's the same way with errors and omissions insurance for a producer. Your product is the film. So if you get sued over the content of the film somehow, this type of insurance is intended to protect you. So it can be exactly that, where someone's suing saying you didn't have the right to use their likeness. It can be someone suing saying you defamed them in the production. It can be a corporation suing saying you used my logo inappropriately or without permission, or you made my product look bad. So errors and omissions is intended to cover that. Now, in the process of getting the policy, they will ask, do you have releases for everyone who appears in the film? And typically the answer is yes, because you think you do. It's always possible that you've made a mistake, and like you mentioned that example, the person shows up that you missed and didn't get a release for. And the insurance would protect you in that case. It would pay for the cost to defend a lawsuit, and then a settlement if there is a settlement with the person.
And so do you recommend people having this as like a permanent ongoing policy or a kind of a la carte?
It depends on the type of work you do. If you're doing independent films, it's typically done per film. If you're a commercial producer, it's typically done on a blanket basis covering all your productions. So,
And a lot of times, a fair amount of our work is associations, so event type stuff. When people sign up to come into the event, there's usually some, fine print that says, you waive your right. Or you're allowing your image to be used. Is that precedent that holds up?
Well, I'll say, again, I'm not an attorney, but I'll say two things. One is that you don't have to be wrong for something to cost you a lot of money, because you have to defend yourself. So let's just suppose in that case, you're filming a big association, somebody comes in and gets drunk and embarrasses themselves, and you just broadcast that and they sue you. You may have every right to have shown them, but you still have to defend that lawsuit, which will cost a lot of money, and the insurance will pay for defense costs. So that's one thing to look at, but it'll depend on the specifics. If it's just, let's suppose there's a major speaker at a conference and you just pan across the audience and get people. The insurance company is probably going to be fine with being a general release on those people, but they may want that main speaker to have signed a specific release saying, yes, I agree to be in this production, because they're so featured in it.
Correct. And then another type of waiver form, which you brought up before, is workers' comp. Can you kind of go over that and what the production community should know about that?
Sure. So that's a question I get all the time. So workers' comp is required by state regulations in every state except for Texas. And workers' compensation covers people for work-related injuries and diseases while they're being paid to do work. And by all the states, they have regulations that say you can't waive your rights to workers' comp. So I can't have somebody working for me sign a document saying, I understand you don't have workers' comp, I won't hold you accountable for it. That means nothing in front of the law. If you're paying people to do work, in most cases you're required to provide
workers' comp. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So just how did you get even involved in this space? I know you have a master's from Michigan, but what kind of led you into this career direction?
It's kind of not a very direct route, I guess. I'm a financial analyst by training, and I worked in the big corporate world. Ford Motor Company was kind of my last big corporate employer. And I just didn't feel like the right fit for me. And I had actually read this article that said, if you don't like meetings, it's because you're in the wrong business and you're meeting with the wrong people. And if you were meeting with people that you found interesting, you would like meetings. And so I actually thought, like, who are the people that I would like meeting with, And I really, to me, it was creative people. I don't consider myself a creative, but I love creative people. I love, their passion for their work and things. So I said, okay, what can I do with my business knowledge to work with creative people? And after thinking about it for a period of time, I came up with insurance. So,
and you've been doing this for how long now?
11 years.
11 years. So how have you seen things change just in 11 years operating your business? Because I was probably with you then in the beginning because I know you've been writing us policies for the only person ever written us policies, so about 10 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So, well, obviously technology has changed a lot, which has made it in some ways easier because we can get more quotes from more insurance companies now than when you had to do things more manually. And we can exchange information, obviously, with clients a lot easier. So those things have changed a lot. The business, of course, in Chicago, the film business has grown a lot and changed a lot from really being more led by commercial production and then some independent film production to really being the biggest part of the business now is episodic television. And the other pieces have grown too, but not as fast as television. So definitely the business has changed a lot. And
you guys are located at Stage 18, which is basically like a video production incubator on the Cinespace lot.
Exactly.
Can you give us an overview of what goes on over there?
It's an interesting place to be. It can be crazy busy one day and quiet the next. But different, independent productions will use it as their production office. So while they're there, it'll be crazy. And then there's some affiliated, peripheral businesses to film there. Like we have Jed Enlow as an entertainment attorney. We have Chicago Media Angels that, do film financing. And then, of course, us doing insurance. And then there's some producers that have regular offices there that are there all the time. And then Stage 18 itself and IFP Chicago, IFP Chicago's office is there as well. They're two nonprofits. They do a lot of programming related to filming. So there's pretty regular programming, and then there's just networking events where people can just come and hang out and meet other people in the industry. So,
Chris, great advice here today. As we wrap up here, is there three main takeaways you'd like aspiring filmmakers or veteran filmmakers, people that are in the video content world, just to kind of know about your business and what people should be preparing themselves for moving forward?
I would say one is that you should evaluate insurance based on the needs of your production and understand that its primary purpose is to help you finish your production should bad things happen, and also to protect your career, to protect your ability to keep working in the industry if bad things happen on a production that you're involved with. So I would say that's one. I would say two is, plan ahead. The further ahead you seek insurance quotes, potentially the better rates we're able to get you because we have time to shop your coverage. And then the third thing I would say is, once you've bought the insurance, you're not done talking to the insurance agent. If things change, you need to reach out and communicate so we make sure that any change in what you're doing is properly covered from an insurance standpoint. So we should stay involved, until the production wraps.
Yeah, and Chris, you guys have always done a great job and treated us very well. So I appreciate your time here on the Taste Media Group Intelligence Series. Tune in next week. We will be back with another episode. Thanks for watching.